It became known as the Battle of Cable Street. The overwhelming public reaction was one of disgust and, very important this, mockery.
The interesting thing is how quickly Mosley became a national figure of fun. The peaked cap, the shiny boots, all that shouting just didn't work. When we ask why Britain never fell for a totalitarian leader, it's about our suspicion of all politicians, our national inability to go the whole hog, and that sense of humour. Cable Street was most unusual. Generally, when people saw lines of marching men in silly uniforms, they simply sniggered.
It hath pleased Almighty God that the high and mighty Prince Edward Albert Christian George...
On Wednesday, the 22nd of January 1936, King Edward VIII watched the proclamation of his own accession to the throne from a window at St. James's Palace.
...is now become king.
At his side was a 40-year-old American called Wallace Simpson.
God save the king!
Their drama would be played out at a toy castle outside London called Fort Belvedere.
The new king was a super celebrity. In many ways, a perfect symbol of modernization. Informal, handsome, beautifully dressed. This man was Hollywood on Thames at a time when, frankly, this country didn't have a lot in the way of homegrown glamour. By the time he came to the throne, Edward had already been having an affair for 2 years with the once divorced and married Mrs. Simpson. His father, George V, had predicted trouble. "When I am dead," he once said, "that boy will ruin himself in 12 months.
Somewhere the sun is shining, so honey, don't you cry. We'll find a silver lining, the clouds will soon roll by."
Edward knew that his affair with a married woman would be a scandal, but the British media kept their deferential distance. The Americans had no such qualms, and paparazzi followed the king and his mistress wherever they went.
Edward says she makes him happy. Bright hours by the blue Mediterranean. Exclusive movie-tone pictures. There have been rumors that he might elope with her and abandon crown and throne for her.
In October 1936, the Foreign Secretary, Anthony Eden, arrived at number 10 to discuss world events, including the Spanish Civil War and the mounting threat from Nazi Germany.
Baldwin's first question to Eden was whether he'd had a lot of telegrams about the king. Eden replied that he hadn't. Baldwin said he'd had a great many, some from the most extraordinary people. "I foresee I shall have a lot of trouble over this. I hope that you won't trouble me too much with foreign affairs just now."
By now, Wallace Simpson was filing for divorce from her second husband, opening the way for her to marry Edward and become queen. Baldwin panicked and made an appointment to visit the king at his Fort Belvedere retreat.
To calm his nerves, Baldwin first asked for a drink, and then he came straight to the point. "You may think me Victorian, sir. You may think my values are out of date. But I believe that I know how to interpret the mind of my own people. And although it is true that standards are lower since the war, that only leads people to expect higher standards from their king."
A few days later, the king received a letter from his personal private secretary. It warned him that his affair was doing untold damage. The government was threatening to resign. Mrs. Simpson, he concluded, must leave the country. Two days later, on the 11th of December 1936, Edward spoke to his people.
I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love.
Britain erupted with an outpouring of support for the king, but hostility towards Wallis Simpson.
In playgrounds across the country, children chanted, "Mrs. Simpson stole our king." But I think she did this country an enormous favour. For Edward was pro-German and just a little too close to the Nazis. He even visited Hitler shortly after he abdicated. By removing this vain, petulant and politically naive man from the throne, Wallis Simpson also took away a real source of domestic danger. Far from being a national blow, the abdication was a great stroke of national luck.
As Britain recovered from abdication fever, a little revolution was taking place at the seaside. And no, not a fascist one. Its leader, Billy Butlin.
Billy Butlin was a tough little character, a natural showman who carried a cutthroat razor in his top pocket. He told friends he had three aims in life: power, money, and women. He started off with a humble hoopla stall, but his big break came when he bought the European license for the new all-American Dodgem car.
The vision of a holiday camp came to Billy Butlin when he noticed hordes of miserable holidaymakers wandering the streets in the rain, desperately looking for something to do. Not everything changes. He found a location here in Skegness and began to design the camp himself with vast dining rooms, theatres and swimming pools. Guests would stay in individual hutch-like mock Tudor chalets.
Billy's first guest was Frida Monk from Nottingham. Unable to contain her excitement, Frida had turned up a day early. One of the managers found her wandering around the still unfinished camp. Clutching her suitcase and looking lost, she was quickly bundled into her chalet. And then it began to snow. Frida spent her first night shivering with cold. She was spotted the next morning having breakfast, wearing her overcoat. But Frida Monk didn't care about the weather. She was just delighted to have a week away from ordinary life.
In 1938, the government passed a new law giving a week's paid holiday to all industrial workers in Britain.
Hello there. Well, this year we got holidays with pay. Look at it.